recordings before
all the way, like say he washes the temple, she admits she's guilty. He has to go the first stone though, doesn't he?
No, because the witnesses have to go the first stone.
So the two witnesses?
Yeah, so I don't know how you, this becomes
if there aren't two witnesses.
if there's not two witnesses, I don't know how you, if a person self-incriminates, I don't know how the Torah deals with that. That's an
You
interesting.
throw the rocks up in the air and let them land on it.
Yeah, you know, how do you stone yourself? I don't know. I mean, that's, so,
Brent,
yeah.
the Torah does deal with this. I mean,
Okay.
he at that point has the option of giving her a certificate of divorce.
Yes, you're right, correct. Yes, that he can do.
What about the situation between David and Bathsheba?
Well, that's a perfect example. Okay, so here's a perfect example. 1 Samuel chapter 11, David goes out on the upper level of the palace, sees Bathsheba, and by the way, the text says that she is bathing, but she's doing a ritual immersion. And it's important that she's doing this ritual immersion. Here's why. Because it says she's doing the ritual immersion because she's just come through the monthly uncleanness.
On her rooftop?
Well, he's on the rooftop. She's down somewhere where he can see her. She's probably out on the roof. She's probably out on the roof. We don't know exactly where she is, but he sees her from his vantage point. Where exactly she is, we don't know. He's looking down and able to see her. Now here's what's interesting though. Because she's doing the ritual purification, it means that she has not gotten pregnant. So that's key to this text. Now here's what happens. David sends for her. She comes, they have relations, she leaves. She sends back a word, and just 2 words.
I'm pregnant.
I'm pregnant. That's all she says. Tell David, hand him these 2 words. Now, there's no witnesses other than the 2 people involved. Now the prophet, Nathan, comes to David and says, there is one person who did see this whole thing.
And you're in trouble.
And you're really in trouble. God saw it, and he's not happy. David doesn't deny it. In fact, he says, I've sinned. But since nobody else saw it, and there's no other witnesses, it's not as if David escapes. God does bring judgment on him. But the community at large cannot do so without witnesses. Okay, so that's where the rub is here.
Prophet's kind of a solid witness.
Well, the prophet didn't see it. The prophet is told by God that it happened. God saw it.
Right, but if he's not a true prophet, he would have already been stoned.
Yes, but the prophet himself physically did not see it happen.
Okay, let me restate this. He's accusing him then under penalty of death himself.
Yes, because he's got a word from the Lord.
Right. So I'm saying, I think that's pretty solid.
Oh, I agree that it happened, and he nails David. David doesn't deny it. He can't deny it because God has said that he did this. So the prophet knows, he's heard from God. He comes to David and says, you sinned. And David says, you're right, I sinned. Absolutely. But the thing is, I don't have to incriminate myself in a court. And since nobody saw it, there's no witnesses. So the only one who saw it is God. But God does bring judgment.
He does.
Even though the people can't do anything because we don't have enough evidence to go on to really prove it. And even if you admit to it, that's not a witness against you in a court. Yeah.
I am curious about one thing in that instance. God punished the only innocent person in that, in a way, correct?
The child.
The child?
No.
Well,
No. It's not a punishment to take a child to him. So,
yeah, I mean,
But even by framing that question, you're challenging his sovereign right to take that child's life whenever he wants, as if that's bad.
Because the offspring of this relationship was not through the mother and the father to a married couple.
No, it's not legitimate, but
Right.
ultimately, is there anything in the Torah that says that child died in Christ?
Oh, wow. You're raising a huge discussion on...
I'm still bringing up that question.
Yeah, that's is every child safe? I mean, that's a huge question.
Okay.
Don't just stop that, Marcus.
That's a massive question. No, that's a massive question.
Mea culpa.
Yeah, that was good. Yes.
I'm hearing what you're saying, but also we're forgetting the fact that David murdered Uriah.
Yes.
And so that's another, to me, the child being taken was a consequence.
I agree.
Didn't God even say something about that, you know?
In fact, he tells David he says, David, there's going to be 4 things happen to you
Yeah.
in punishment for your sin. So yeah, and David's whole family basically collapses.
Yeah, so murdering Uriah when Uriah really trusted him.
Right.
I mean, like I said, there's a whole bunch of issues here.
Oh, it was the tangled web was incredible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wasn't Uriah also one of the commanders? Was he one of the great mighty men of David? He was a highly esteemed. He wasn't just a normal soldier.
Oh,
He was
Uriah
also-
was one of the upper echelons, yes,
Yeah.
of David's. Yeah, he was in the inner circle, so to speak.
God turns right around and gives him Solomon,
Okay.
Bathsheba.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
When a young child dies, say, for something like this,
Right.
it's not the child that's feeling the pain, so to speak, it's the parents.
Yeah.
They're paying a tremendous price.
Right. So, God has to answer your question, God has the right in this situation to take the life of this child because it's a punishment for what the parents have done.
Well, no, and he's right. The child is never going to know the difference.
Right.
I mean, and the child needs to go right back into the arms of Abraham, but
Yeah, so it's, yeah, go ahead.
But the nexus of your question goes all the way back to Adam. You and I and everybody here got death because of his sin.
Right. It does. It all kind of comes back and connects. Yes, Cory.
Well, because of his sin, it affected how he dealt with his children when they sinned in a similar fashion.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, so here's what happens. Amnon rapes Tamar, and because Tamar is the full sister of Absalom, Absalom comes back 2 years later and kills Amnon. So you have all this intrigue going on, and then Absalom rebels against David. Absalom has long hair. He ends up wrapping his hair around a tree, and then a general in the army there with David, he ends up killing Absalom. So you have Amnon, Absalom, Tamar. All 3 of them end up with tragic deaths. And this is the child. That's the 4th punishment. The 4 children that have problems because. So here's the thing. God, and this is the point of our text. There is one who sees. There is one who sees everything. Even things that people think that they're hiding. He knows everything. Things done in private, he knows.
That's right.
And while man may not be able to do anything about it because we don't have enough evidence, the truth is God has enough evidence that he can do what he wants to do. Yes.
Concerning this illegitimate child, we know that God has the right to take life at any time for any reason that he wants.
Correct.
But we know that his judgment on each individual is perfect.
Yes.
He judges the heart from the moment of birth to the moment of conception because he knows the beginning from the end. So his judgment was perfect, regardless of what.
True. Even though we may not feel like it's right,
Exactly.
it's always just. And here's the thing.
And also,
Here's another concept. Nobody likes this one. I know you're not going to like it when I say it. I already know that going into it. Many times, what looks like to us innocent people suffer, or to put it another way, there's collateral damage. When people sin, there's often collateral damage.
Rain falls on the just and the unjust.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so sometimes parents think, and people think, well, if I sin, all I hurt is myself. The only person I really hurt is myself. No, the truth is that oftentimes there's concentric circles of people who get hurt. And so all of a sudden you think, well, it's just going to affect me. No, children get affected, and then grandchildren, and you can see it in families where generational sin has had generational repercussions. And they get into these cycles, and more sin happens, and the cycle doesn't get broken. And it's perpetuated on and on because of decisions made back here. Yes.
Two things. First of all, we don't know what that judgment was, so we don't need to have the midrash because we're making assumptions that may be right or wrong. In David's case, though, the penalty if you are jealous of your wife and you drink this potion that is laid out as prescribed, the child possibly dies. It sounds like a systemic if that could be. Well, God, because of who David was as a ruler of his people,
Right.
very esteemed, and a man who actually loved God, God said it's a man after my own heart, God became the witness, became that potion, and did exactly what was commanded. Because anytime there's a child involved, if they take that potion, the child is lost anyway.
Yes.
So this time God did it directly, just like Jesus turned water to wine. There was no growing of grapes. He just
Right.
skipped the middleman.
Right. Yeah. In a situation where we don't know, God steps in, and that's what we have here.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
death is not always a punishment.
True.
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 Precious in the eyes of the Lord are death and saints.
Yes. It's not always a punishment. In this instance, it may be. We don't know, but it may be. Clearly, David's children have some problems due to his sin, and it's directly related. Yes, Bill.
Is that an indication that every illegitimate child is condemned or should suffer some kind of punishment?
No.
I'm not going to judge that. That's not my job. I don't know.
No, absolutely
I
not.
mean, that question has to tag along behind what
Sure,
you said.
but I don't.
It wasn't a judgment against the child, it was a judgment against the parent.
Oh, I'm not saying
Right.
it was. I'm just saying, but that's, the child was lost physically. I'm not saying he's lost spiritually. I have no clue, and that's not my position. I'm just saying,
Well, the child loses nothing if he goes to be with God.
Yeah.
And God judges the heart rightly.
correct,
The child is not a loser.
Right.
right.
So, but it is a judgment on the parents.
Yes.
Definitely.
So, all right, yes.
Well, God creates all of us, even in the womb, because he said that Esau I hate and Jacob I love, and they hadn't even been born yet.
Right.
So God
Yeah.
is infinite in planning things that happen.
He's sovereign. He is sovereign. And that's the point is that he sees all this.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to segue just for a moment, because in the book of Ruth, for instance, and we see in the prophets, I'm going to point this out a little bit later on, we have God testifying against people. Well, if God testifies for you or against you, you're in good shape. Not if he testifies against you. If God testifies against you, that's not good. If he testifies for you, it is good. Yes.
Can we define the word hate in that particular verse?
Oh, yes.
That's it. That's important.
Yes.
Just to clear things up.
I will. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Jacob, I have loved. And the word love and hate, as you hear it, by the way, we're talking about the word ahav, love, and the word sineh, hate. Is not in the sense of God saying, it's the idea of preference. I have chosen one over the other, to work with one over the other. It's not as if God has hatred towards this person. I have preferred this one over that one. So it's used in the Hebrew scripture that way. It's not the idea of God saying, like you said, prenatal, God hates. I have chosen this one, I have not chosen that one.
Because he knows the beginning from the end. And
Yeah, you could go that route, but I'm just saying, in this
Look
instance...
what happened to Esau.
Huh?
Look what happened with Esau.
Right.
There was a reason.
Yeah, there are reasons, but the point is that when God hates in those instances, it's not the idea of God saying, I have anger towards this person per se. It's the idea of preference, of choice, for the purpose of the covenant.
because we're told to hate our mother and father.
Right, love,
In possession.
in relationship to God, hate your mother and father.
Well, that makes sense if you're honoring your mother and your father.
It sounds like.
In other words, the love of God, the difference between the love of your God and love of your mother and father will be like hate. It will seem like hate because the one for the other will be so much more. The preference for the one over the other. So it's not hate in the sense of anger
Holding one in
towards.
higher esteem.
It's instead of preference and esteem. So as it's being used, it's not the idea of God hating. So any other comments or questions?
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I don't know as much as you guys do, but doesn't it seem not fair? It's almost like giving birth to two children and knowing that you will love one, and kids are moldable, they're like wax.
Mm-hmm.
So if one always knows that mom doesn't love him, he knows no matter how hard he tries, no matter what he does, that love will never be there.
Right.
So what is the point? And why would it be done?
Okay.
Prefer one over another.
Great question, and I didn't make it clear. It's a great question. When it talks about God loving Jacob and hating Esau, here's what he's trying to say: is that he's going to his love for Jacob is he's the one that God is using to move the covenant forward.
Jacob.
I loved Jacob in order to move the covenant forward. I
choose Jacob.
Hate
I hold him in higher
Esau.
esteem.
Huh?
I hold him in higher esteem.
I hold him in higher esteem. I'm not going to work through Esau.
Who is the eldest?
Who's the eldest in this story. So it's not as if God is saying, I have no love for, or no desire to help, or no compassion for Esau. He's simply saying, I'm going to work through this one.
And don't forget that Esau had great wealth as well.
Oh yeah, Esau ends up blessed by God. Esau ends up incredibly wealthy and ends up blessed by God. So it's not as if God is saying, you're right, that one of the things we do see in the book of Genesis, and I pointed this out in the past, is that on a human level, you see parents who play favorites. And it causes, here again, ripple effect. Ripple effect. Parents think, intuitively, if I have a favorite, that this won't have any impact. Wrong. You see it over and over again where the child that is favored gets arrogant. I mean, look at Joseph. Joseph says, hey guys, I had a couple of dreams. You guys are all going to bow down to me. Oops. Well, there's a way to win friends and influence your brothers. You all are going to serve me. And they're going, you got to be kidding me, you little punk. So what does Dad do? Dad sends him out and says, hey, go find out what your brothers are doing. The brothers, they conspire to kill him. And then one of them says, Dad, let's make some money out of the deal and just sell this kid. We'll be done with him. In other words, you create this kind of animosity when you play favorites. And every parent kind of intuitively plays favorites. They don't mean to sometimes. They don't even know they're doing it. But it's the child that maybe thinks like you, acts like you, looks like you, gravitates towards the same things that you do. And so because of a myriad of reasons, whatever they may be, for instance, Isaac is the favorite of his parents. See?
No taste.
And they have played favorites. And look what it's done. So here's what happens. In this instance, though, when God says he loves Jacob and he hates Esau, what he's trying to say is this: I am going to work the covenant Messiah and the work of the covenant through this one in preference over this one. Not because there's necessarily anything wrong with this one in and of itself, just because I'm going this direction. It's not a hatred in that sense. Yes?
Isn't part of what God is saying in the whole Esau-Jacob thing, too, is society says the eldest has preference and that
Yes.
he will be the one to inherit. And God is saying, I choose.
Yes.
I am not bound by the rules of society.
Correct.
I choose
Yes.
who I choose.
That's
and
the
I
reason.
don't have to explain it.
Right. Society in that time period would have chosen the firstborn. The firstborn automatically gets the rights. And but the firstborn has to take care of mom and dad. He gets a double portion, but out of that double portion, he has to take care of mom and dad. Well, now, all the way through the book of Genesis, God rejects the firstborn and chooses the second, the third, the fourth. In fact, we get to the 11 tribes. You think Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. It's Judah that he's going to choose, the fourth one in. So, yes.
I was just going to say that there's so much involved with what we're trying to figure out here, because everybody is baggage. They get born, they grow up in their family, things happen, they're not perfect, and then they go on and then they have kids and blah blah blah. For example, like with Esau, Jacob loved Esau. Isaac loved Esau because Esau was the cool dude that went out and hunting and all this stuff. Rebecca loved Jacob. And then you have in David's situation, Jesse really dug his other kids.
Yes.
And then David got to go out because he wouldn't even think he was worthwhile to go hang out with the prophet. So, I mean, I really think it's good that God has the say-so in this because, to leave it up to parents who are totally, not really being fair a lot of times to their kids.
Yeah.
I think God has to be the one who makes the ultimate decision.
Sure. And I think that's oftentimes why he does.
Yeah.
Yeah, God's sovereign and he decides who will be in and who will be out, so to speak. But it's not as if God has hatred for one and love for the other
No,
in the sense
of course not. Of course not.
in the sense of how he treats them. Yes.
The case of Jacob and Esau, Jacob also valued the covenant, he valued the promise.
Yes.
Esau did so, who cares?
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting that the mother is told, though, while they're in utero, that this is the way it will be. This is the sovereignty of God issue. That the one will serve the other and the one will be placed above the other. This goes to God's sovereignty to decide, and this really comes back to the point of Numbers chapter 5, is to say, in all of this, God gets to decide. We bring it to him when we don't know. When we can't prove one way or the other, we bring it to God.
Brent?
Yeah.
So could the argument be made then that she was acting in God's will and she subverted his will?
Let's say that again.
And she said, she was told that the older will serve the younger.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So in basically
in her trickster,
defying, in all of her deception, was she technically serving God?
No, I don't think so.
It's kind of like the Sarah thing where they were afraid that maybe it wasn't going to happen the way that God said it was. So I'll just help God along a little bit.
Trying to help God out. We are never.
And it always backfires.
Yes.
Yeah, not
it's
like
never.
Complaint.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's not like. Look, our role is not to help God along. He is sovereign. He is capable. What she's saying about Abraham. Sarah comes to Abraham and says, look, I've gotten old. You've gotten old. Maybe Abraham tries another way. Abraham says to God, hey, can I adopt Eliezer? God says, no, that's not the plan. Then Sarah says, well, maybe Abraham's the one to be the father, but I'm not to be the one. So, okay, fine. God says, no, that was not the plan. So here's what God's doing in that instance. He's teaching them a concept of resurrection. That out of death will come life. And then it's going to be miraculous. It's going to be, nobody on human level can take credit for it because it's beyond human ability to achieve. Once Sarah has gone past the age of childbearing, God says, okay, now, and we wait even longer, now you'll be the one. I'll raise life out of death. And God says, that's my sovereign will, my sovereign choice. Man's always, so in answer to your question, Rebecca trying to help the process along, no, that's not God's will. God works through that and still accomplishes his purposes, but he never wanted Rebecca or Isaac to be deceitful. That wasn't his plan. That was their plan.
I have a heart for Esau. And I think along the way that he acted far more godly than Jacob.
And Esau comes out okay, actually. As you look at the story, he actually comes out with a lot of property, a lot of land, and doesn't. He and Jacob reconcile towards the end. Although interestingly, Esau is a problem child on some levels. He's got his rebellion, like every child does. In fact, he marries two Canaanites, we're told, two Canaanite women, just to spite his parents. Have you ever known kids to do something just to spite their parents? No, not this true. Never.
You may question what Jacob did, but he was following the orders of his mother.
Yes.
Everything that he did, he didn't think of that by himself.
No, I agree.
That was his mother saying, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that,"
Right.
and he was obeying his mother.
I agree. But that wasn't God's plan.
No, it wasn't. But
Right.
but I'm just saying that
Oh, I know.
when you judge his actions, you have to take into account that he was a kid and he was following the instructions of his mother.
Right. Yeah. And in fact, he tries to dissuade her of this plan.
Right.
And really, should we be going through with this? She says, yeah. She actually says, it'll be on me. Whatever happens will be on me. Okay. And somehow in the providence of God and in the sovereignty of God, God works through all that. But that wasn't his plan. All right. Good discussion. All right. Take your seders, please. Weird text.